Anybody who knows about David Firth has probably most likely seen Salad Fingers, for that is what he's most known for. But if you look deep enough into David's stuff, you'll realize that he has made quite a few other series. I might dive into some of his other series or one-off specials later on. But for right now, I want to focus on one of his other current series I still uploading episodes of, and that is Sock. So far, there are only 6 episodes of Saw, but each one of them is, well, weird. But, I mean, whoever's seen David Firth already knows about that. But even though David himself has confirmed that these are a series of dreams, I feel like there's something more to it. And the reason being is because if you look at each Sock episode, sure, it's random nonsense. But if you look at it just right, there are certain little threads that can indicate a deeper story being told. Either that or I'm just crazy and this actually is a fever dream. So let's just start off with the first episode. A man is walking through the streets where he is telling his brain to stop thinking about this dream he had last night. A man with a brown shirt asks him if he was talking to him, to which the man responds that he was talking to himself about a weird dream he had about Bob Dylan playing on the radio, to which the brown-shirt man tells him he isn't interested. The rest of the dream is that he is in a department store where people were avoiding him for some odd reason. Perhaps it was because he was running with a knife. The man starts crying and realizing he has no sense of direction when running, which he runs towards customers with them screaming for their dear lives. The man, still crying, goes to a dog, which he realizes isn't scared of him. We suddenly hear the dog tell him they are out of lice pictures. Okay. The last shots are the man running through the department store, but the problem is, while he tries to run, he can barely walk, which gets the attention of an older lady who isn't scared of him, and tells him her husband is clever and can help him get back to normal. They both head to the kitchen where the lady tells him to wait. The man then tells himself he knows he is dreaming, but he is basically paralyzed. The lady comes back to him asking if he wants to check out their newly installed Russian laughter room. And our final shot is some Russian men laughing. I don't know how to explain this. And even though I know the series takes place as dreams, I feel like there is a bigger story in this. So a user in the comments for Sock 1 named Alpho Zalgo describes his own interpretation, saying that each episode is a different type of dream. But I don't think that's quite it. I do believe the dreams or episodes have meaning, but in a way where it's inspired by real events that happen in these people's lives. Salad Finger's first most famous piece demonstrates this quite well, where he lives in the present but has events from the past, going from reality into a fictional world inside of his head. And in case you don't know, I made a video covering Salad Finger, so give that a watch if you haven't. Sock 1 does pretty much the exact same thing. We can follow a 3-step process that I made in order to solve this. Step 1. Gather all the crucial information that can help. Step 2. We just had to figure out what is fiction and what is reality. And finally, step 3. Check the facts and piece together a story that makes somewhat sense. For step 1, we got the facts that this is a man with a dream. He was running in a department store with a knife, most likely not being aware people were running from him because of the knife. He was also listening to Bob Dylan on the radio, and Bob Dylan was a singer most famous in the 60s, giving us an estimate on the time that this dream takes place. A dog tells him they are out of lice pictures, and he is struggling to move, eventually becoming paralyzed, and the Russian guy's laughing. Now we got step 1 finished. Now for step 2, which is surprisingly not that tricky. The whole thing with the dog and lice pictures is complete fiction, because lice can't do much to you if you were thinking the lice were controlling him. Lice can't do that. Also, the dog is literally talking, which is a dream. It's one of those weird things David puts in that tries to throw you off guard. The Russians are fiction because, do I even need to explain that? Now, let's get into step 3. Him running in the store and eventually becoming paralyzed are pretty much the only things that are real from the real world. Now the reason I say that is because yes, I know he says that he's having a dream and he's explaining the dream, but I'm also thinking that perhaps we're seeing his dream, but parts of this happen in reality, if that makes any sense. And what I can deduce is perhaps the entire thing is actually fiction, as I just said. I got a story that I think makes somewhat sense in the reality portion. This man was mentally unstable and decided to go into the bank with a knife, possibly losing his head, not realizing what he is doing. That is when police come in and the clerk comes out and probably shoots him and possibly kills him, which could explain the paralysis. I don't know why I mentioned the clerk thing. I thought that would just be funny, but it could obviously be the officer that shot him. And then eventually he becomes completely paralyzed, making him think this is a dream he can't wake up from. But really, this was all just a dream, since we see him trying to explain to someone earlier in the story, I gotcha. Did I convince you that this was just another dream? I hope so. Honestly, I kind of got lost myself, but basically what I'm saying is that, yeah, this actually is all a dream. But basically how to deduce the dream is that the fact that he was mentally insane at times and went into a bank with a knife and he got probably tased and shot. And the rest of it is just nonsense he thought of, and he's just explaining it to a normal man. It's kind of a sad story a little bit. But that's really all I got for Sock 1. Now, for Sock 2. I don't know where to actually begin with this. First off, it's called Petit. It's called Petit. I can't get this right. Petikobid. Okay, that's what I'm going to call it, Petikobid. That's what I'm going to call it because I do not know how to say that. Which David actually left a comment saying that the sound he uses at the beginning sounded like the noise that he was using. So he just called the title that. I guess he just ran out of ideas of what to call stuff. It starts with a man going into his house to find a taller man in his house with a broken window. And his house is surrounded by some sort of tentacles, walking macaroni, and gaping holes in lore. The taller man also has an eyeball in the middle of his stomach and tells this small man a weird fact that when a half-eaten dog falls from the sky, it is good luck. The small man accepts this advice, and the next day there is a dog eating his cheese, and the dog tells him he is eating his cheese, which we see him doing. The next scene is with him and what I'm guessing is his wife are at the house, and his wife tells him there isn't much noise out today, which he finds very odd. The next supposed dream is called Organs and Mains, which starts off with the man asking what that means and saying, "This is all I took from that dream," making it seem like he awoke from this Organs and Mains dream and is waking up in reality. So it seems like there are moments in Sock 2 that seem to be grounded in reality, but then there's sometimes where they do say when something is in fact a dream, like this. But the first part is probably reality, and I'll explain that in a little bit. He is then told there's a dog in his guitar, to which he is not surprised about this, saying that this is not a dream and there's a dog in his guitar. So I guess he's just okay with this. Whom he tells if he is hungry, eat the guitar strings, and acknowledges he is talking to him, and then suddenly the dog starts barking instead of talking to the man. We then cut to a woman using a cat as a machine gun, to which the cat tells her to stop, and he doesn't like it, and these weird tubes are stretching around her and letting go of her and moving around the house. I don't know what happened. She then morphs into a question, asking the man, given the choice, "What do you dream about?" To which he says he loves being pestered. Also, when she morphs, reversing the audio gives us the name James Sullivan from Monsters Incorporated. Anyways, the man imagines a man selling tapes to be pestering him, only for the tape salesman to straight up die, leaving the man happy and going about his day. And that is literally it. So let's use our 3-step strategy from earlier. I just realized how bad of an idea making this video was. Step number 1. This one is just, it's weird. It's very weird, dude, when it comes to crucial information, since the whole video is weird, as I said before. So sadly, we're going to have to skip this for right now, except for the cat one. That one is obviously not real, and it's just, because it's not relevant, has no purpose at all. For step 2, when we put this into reality or fantasy, is where we get a few problems. I can confirm that the dog being stuck in the guitar is real in this world, since the man confirms that he just woke up from a dream called Organs and Mains and is not surprised by this, like it's just an everyday thing. This also confirms the house he lives in this world is most likely real, perhaps even the macaroni walking around the house. The wife tells him it's quiet, and it's also probably real, even though it doesn't really matter. The tape salesman is a dream because we hear the man describing the dream. And finally, the beginning portion of the man breaking into his house is actually real, and I'll explain that with the final step. For our last step, when making a story out of this, I believe everything else that happens before the beginning, with an introduction to the dog and wife and house, etc. So since at the beginning we see this man is in his house by a broken window, heavily implying that this man broke in. And when he tells the smaller man about luck, that a half-eaten dog is good luck, it's actually this guy stating he killed the dog and maybe his wife, since the half-eaten dog means a dead dog. And since the man got the dog, he will not kill the smaller man. I know it's very dark, but I refuse to let any of these videos pass as just being a normal dream. That is literally all I can deduce from this episode, and I may just be overthinking it though. But you know what? You came to this channel, you should have expected me to lose my insanity. Well, luckily, I'm not going to lose my whole insanity just yet. No, that will probably come in stock 5 or 6. But overall, I would say that so far these thought series are actually pretty good. And yeah, if you don't like this so far, then click off the video, because it's gonna get a whole heck of a lot of weirder. What was that? What did I just say? This one is titled 10 Different Types of Soup, which starts with mentioning a man observing a black fire in the middle of a hole. This then takes us back 744 years back, where there's a small boy trapped in a 4-walled room with a window on one wall and a big crack in another. He asks what he's doing in here, and the boy looks through the crack to find a young girl in the same type of room. One thing to note though is that the girl's room has something on the wall that looks to be a hole with something that looks like a small eye peering in it. Just then a Frankenstein looking dude comes in with a sledgehammer and kills the girl. Also, it appears when I said that there was an eye in the wall, I was actually right, because directly after the Frankenstein dude looks at the boy and we see a perspective from the hole in that little girl's wall looking straight at the boy. The Frankenstein guy goes over to the boy and says this.
Is my daddy in there? I've looked all over, but I can't find him.
Apparently, he is looking for his father, which obviously is not only creepy, but very off-putting and random. As always, that's nothing new for David. The boy then seems to be confuzzled upon hearing this. I'm not the one who called him confuzzled, these 2 polar bear heads on sticks did. They then think his name is Howard, and the second one asks the first one if he should call the boy Howard to his face, which he refuses. Just then a third head with glasses comes into frame and says he will call him Howard to his face. The next scene takes place where somehow the boy escapes, and the third head, now in a salesman suit, sings a random song about flannels, chips, and 100 pairs of lips. It obviously doesn't make any real sense. The boy ignores this and says that he saw his face on the posters on the walls. We are then shown a text showing that the following scene never actually happened, and the voice telling us this message sounds like reversed audio in a way. I have taken the privilege to reverse it for you, and this was the result.
Snapper, I've
Seven of Marapa.
As you could tell, that was utter nonsense. Unless you guys know something that I don't, then feel free to comment me about what in the world he said. This immediately follows with the three heads just talking gibberish all at once and seem to be poking their heads out of anthills. We go back to the boy, who is now back in his cellar, but this time there is a woman behind him. She tells him that a man keeps stealing her soup for his dog, and she would like to have some soup, but he steals it each time she makes it. The next scene displays her going up to the boy, telling him it's his turn to go into a room that is apparently right beside them. Also, another thing that immediately caught my eye was that the room now looks like a corridor instead of a room, judging by the long hallways behind the woman. The next scene, the boy goes into the room which leads to the outside, and we see the black fire behind him. He hears a lot of noise in the distance, believing it to be his brother, who we figure out seconds later the brother's name is Joshua. The boy approaches the source of the noise, discovering the Frankenstein-looking man bashing some heads of previous victims. He tells the boy that he forgot his hammer, but they are made from trees, so it's okay. We then get a literal abrupt ending, ending this video. So for step 1 of the analysis procedure, we have a bit more information this time. We know that this young boy is trapped in what appears to be an isolation room of sorts, but he isn't the only one here, with a big guy who seems to be his brother in some way, murders the other people there. We also know that this place can shift from being a room to a hallway. Either that or it's just a scene change, and there is a room that leads to an exit. We also know that there is a fire here, and 744 years later a man starts to watch it. And the boy and his brother Joshua seem to do a lot of things together. Transitioning into step 2, I can pretty much confirm the three heads aren't real, simply because not only we are told this isn't real, but there isn't real evidence that they actually exist at all. Like, when the boy says he saw the head's face on the posters, not only were there no posters in the actual room that we saw, but also that is a segment that didn't happen. If they do exist, they're just a weird form of entertainment. The isolation rooms are real, and him escaping the place probably is too. His brother might be a killer, but more on that in step 3. The soup woman is somewhat involved, but the soup story doesn't seem as important. That is pretty much all the crucial information needed for the story, so let's move on to step 3. I am debating on what this place actually was, and honestly I actually don't think that it's a kidnapping situation. I actually think that it's a mental hospital. Let me explain this, because I can imagine that doesn't make any sense. When the brother asks, "Is my daddy in there?" think about what this could mean. The only time somebody would ever ask that is if a child is looking for their father in a situation, most likely a situation associated with them running off, going somewhere, or perhaps, if we are being more specific, going into a room. There are many rooms in this place, and the exit is easy to get out of. Therefore, when he says this, he doesn't say, "Is my daddy here?" Instead he says, "Is my daddy in there?" Keyword is in there, as in a specific place. So, then why does the brother kill the kids? I think that is an allegory of how you can't save everyone from their injuries. So then why does he kill the children? I feel like this was a way of David trying to confuse us, but even if it isn't that, it could be that perhaps either the brother was the cause of the injury they died from, or he grew up and became a butcher, or worked at the hospital. I don't have any real evidence for any three of those claims, but that's all I got. And the woman talking about the soup, I feel like is just a normal conversation that, like if a friend is asking you about your day, or, something like that, kind of like a receptionist in a way. And then she says to the boy that's his turn to go into the room, is her directing him. Then the final bit, I believe him exiting so easily shows that there are 3 ends when going into a hospital. You could either die in the hospital, sadly, you can stay there until you are treated, or you leave where your injury wasn't that severe to begin with. And the brother butchering all the corpses at the end is just as I said, he might have grew up into the butchering business. Or he did become a mass murderer, who knows. Then there's the fire. Honestly, I just think this is a representation on how certain things stay the same. And probably after that hospital possibly went bankrupt, or something tore it down. the fire stayed. I literally do not know. I also believe that the brothers are in the hospital for 2 reasons. The boy is experiencing some sort of hallucination syndrome or disorder, most likely schizophrenia based on how the boy acts, and also the fact that the room changes and how he seems to not be aware of certain dangers in front of him. Joshua probably has violent mental outbursts, I guess. I honestly don't know, but that seems close enough. Lastly, the eye that I mentioned, it was in the wall, is an allegory of how closely the hospital staff can watch a patient and yet not know how they are dealing with their mental struggles. That is actually all I got for SOC 3. The SOC 3 I think is the one that I tried to solve that just did not have enough information for me to decipher it. But I mean, overall it's still good. I mean, like, I think it's supposed to be like that. Because, you know, David has confirmed that these are in fact dreams, so it makes sense. Alright, so now on to SOC 4. This one starts with a bald, shirtless man with a large beard inside of what looks like a large empty old box, telling us what happened to him. Apparently he used to be a test subject of some kind and describes himself as a fat lard of a man, hooked up to some weird machines, and all he could physically do was think. He also mentions within the next 15 seconds his urination process during this, and it is insane to listen to and graphic to look at, so I will save you from enduring that. We learned that he agreed to be a part of a testing project, this one being to help power a local dry cleaning service. Somehow or another, we learn from the owner of the dry cleaning shop that through this man's pancreas, he makes his business boom. I wish that I could say this a whole nother way, but that is literally what he says. I'm paraphrasing it a little bit. That's basically exactly what he says. This is one of those moments where I wrote something down in the script and it sounds way weirder saying it out loud. Also, it's likely that this owner is very honest and well respected because he even like tells one of the customers that this man is locked inside of his basement, and the customer does not believe him. The owner comes down to the basement and he says that he needs to make an adjustment on a machine down there. The machine drills a hole in this man, and we cut back to the present day bearded man saying the testing makes all the difference. But before he can explain himself, we get shown an ad for, get this, a computer that thinks it's a pedophile. The cops use this as a trick to arrest people, and we are informed that the inventor of this computer, oh boy, this is going to be fun saying this guy's name, Professor D. Gelscraft, somehow made it to where any inanimate object can be aware of itself. That's most likely a scam because we see some tests done on a cigarette lighter for this experiment, and despite Gelscraft saying it's aware, we don't actually see it. We now cut to a third scenario of a man with a wasting head connecting to a tube of some kind when a doctor comes in and asks how he's doing today. Through a close-up, we see and are told that the man's cheeks started to melt, but seemed to stop melting and cause some pain for him. And now the tube is pumping something into his head, most likely into his brain, which he mentions hurts more than the cheek. The doctor tells him that despite him just complaining about the tube, the doctor reveals that he just thought that. But instead, what he actually said vocally was that he is feeling great as ever, and the doctor takes that as the right information despite it not being correct. Now we shift back to the fat man in the basement. The owner comes down and offers him some food, but since he can't speak, the owner thinks he doesn't want anything. Then he takes a stick and starts to poke the man, and the man says, something.
What was that? Orphan? Did you say orphan? I'll write that down on this blackboard. Marble? Was that marble? Did you say marble then? I'll write that down. Pain? Who's pain?
It's hard to make out what he actually said, but most likely is something along the line of, "I'm in terrible pain," or "release me from this pain." And the owner confuses this with the words orphan, marble, and paying. So he believes that the man is trying to tell him to pay the orphans in marbles. Then we cut to the professor again, who asks an audience full of people if they ever smoked a car like a cigarette. I swear David brings out the weirdest stuff in me. David has my perfect sense of humor. So anyway, the audience starts talking among themselves if it's even possible to do that. But the professor says he will find a solution to this problem. He then calls the audience silly people because they are not scientists. Obviously, the audience is revolted by this, and they tell him to take that back, which the professor refuses. It is then revealed that the bearded man from the start has been watching this the entire time, wondering why a scientist would go against his audience. For some reason, this gives the bearded man an idea. A mad idea. A weird, convoluted, mad idea. If he pressed hard on his left hip bone, would he shrink? And vice versa for the right side. He tries it, and it actually works. He finds a small red Wrangler car, which was his favorite car, and I guess it was a toy of his, and since he is small enough to drive it, he does so. He then shrinks again and again, this time standing on some spongy-looking things. He thinks it might be a tiny planet, so he goes inside it. He ends up in a black void, which he says is very hard to move in. And when he closes his eyes, he sees a yellow hoop of some kind, getting closer and closer to him. And we end the video off with saying that in his mind he made a trophy shelf awarding himself something each time he passed through the hoop. Now, how in the world would I explain this video? That's the end, by the way. See, this is why I love David so much. It's stuff that's so freaking weird to explain. Okay, bear with me for this next half, because like 4, 5, and 6 are going to be exactly like this. Well, actually 4 is easier. 5 and 6 are going to be a whole nerd train wreck to figure out. Simply put, it's about the commercialization of the healthcare news and even a few illegal industries. This is honestly something that isn't really that surprising once you dive into it. Using the 3-step procedure, I feel like we can possibly eliminate the entire ending sequence in the paying orphans and marbles bit as non-important. But honestly, that's about it. The same applies for step 2, pretty much everything is utilized here. Allow me to explain our 3rd step. Despite not saying how he became a fat man strapped to machinery, or how he escaped, but based on how he is treated and the way he describes himself, once you put everything into place, this is almost clear as day, like a messed up depiction of a sweatshop. Think about it. In case you aren't familiar with what a sweatshop is, it's an illegal form of working labor with very low wages and excessively long working hours. Sometimes they are so bad that many would consider it a huge and miserable form of torture once you look into all sweatshops actually do. This then could very definitely explain why this man is hooked up to these machines. He is being used as a vessel for what we see as a dry cleaning shop, is given no breaks, and based on the limited words we hear him speak, he appears to be in constant pain for what the store owner has put him through. Then there's the doctor with the patient being hurt from the tube in his head. It should be bloody obvious what this represents. It's telling us in a nutshell how modern hospitals are like sometimes. Say you have a pain in your forehead, possibly a tumor. Nah, you'll be fine, just take this pill. You don't have health insurance or possibly need an organ transplanted. No, get out of the hospital. In this case, the doctor doesn't listen to his patient, and then he can just keep coming back or complaining, giving the doctor more money. Speaking of crazy professionals, Professor Gelscraft has made meaningless and most likely fake products, this being a scam to get more people's attention, and sadly it seems to work. Like when he says any inanimate object can be aware of its existence due to a discovery that he made. But there is actually no proof that he is telling the truth here. Well, I mean, there's also no proof that he's lying, but still. Even later, we see that the professor lashes out at an audience just because he thinks he is superior to them. And what started this lashing out was just because he asked the audience if they could smoke a card like a cigar. And also, the fact that this is on TV and the bearded man is wondering why this would happen is simply just showing that people and even the news love drama, including myself. As for the last bit, with the man getting smaller, that I believe is representing people trying out conspiracy theories for themselves and going a bit mad. but it could most likely just be a random weird piece David decided to add in. Also, if you're wondering how the bearded man escaped the sweatshop, I'm guessing the place got ran out of business. There's not really any information to discover that. Well, there you go. I hope that made some sense. To make this even more interesting, let's shift our view from healthcare and commercialization to 3 skins missing their men. For Sock 5, our fabled story begins when a young man with a technologically advanced hat and a girl with a smushed-in face carrying a supposedly empty box walking down a trail. They stop walking when they encounter a severed head inside of an empty tree stump who tells them something. The girl drops the box and then he tells them someone named Billy Masters has been a very naughty boy. He asks the two if they understood what he is telling them. When they don't answer, he gets angry and repeats it if they understood what he told them. Instead of answering, the boy has a gag reflex and throws up 3 scrabbled letters, those being Y, E, and S, obviously saying yes, he understands. Interestingly, the Sock 5 intro is spelled out with scrabbled letters. A possible theme of some kind, perhaps? The severed head gets mad for some reason at the boy, telling him to pick the letters up, and tells the girl, who is now holding the empty box again, to put him away inside it. The head then jumps inside, and we see the two then start walking through a town, most likely being their hometown. Also based on Firth's description of the video, the children are actually being controlled by this head. As they are walking somewhere, we not only see there's a raccoon dog thingy hybrid, I don't know what it is, beside them, but our view then shifts to a blonde-haired man looking through his window, wondering where the children are actually headed. The man closes his window, and we see there are 3 white skins, and they are being held up on what appears to be a clothing line. He says that they give him comfort, and he wants to keep them in the best condition possible, and for some reason, he believes everyone wants a piece of the skins. Just then, after being boastful to his neighbors, his ear comes off. It then floats away into a square hole in the wall. Don't worry, this hole will come back in Sock 6, surprisingly. The man then proceeds to sniff the skin, saying it takes him back. We then go back in time, I guess, to a ruined and abandoned looking town and are shown 6 fancy people eating. The man who has the 3 skins says that he is hidden behind one of the faces at this dinner party. I have no idea what language they are speaking here, for they are speaking a different language, but apparently they are telling jokes. Then a man in orange stands up and either seems to be mad about something or he is doing a chant of sorts. Just then, a bug-like creature from Men in Black gets on the roof and falls from the sky and starts busting up the roof. Just then, its head comes off, and once it bites a hole in the roof, it goes down and bites the orange-clothed man in the forehead. There's the bite of 2012 for you. Everyone runs in panic, and we shift to a woman who was attending this dinner, who is most likely the man from before in disguise. The woman, or man I guess, observes a painting titled 3 Men Without Skin. We now go into their story, and we see the 3 of them crab walking over to a bar with a dead lady in the corner. They go up to a guy at what appears to be a bar that sells drugs, actually. They ask for a pickled chin and a silver sausage, which I tried looking them up at the times of Firth making this video, which was in 2012 by the way. There is nothing relating to those terms, showing these recommendations to be utter nonsense, at least to us. And then we hear this hilarious exchange about Iraq. I would explain it if I could, but I literally can't. Also, this is probably one of the funniest jokes David has made.
Yeah, give me a silver sausage too. And a rack.
That rack? Needle rack?
Get the needle rack, and I'll take the same plus another 3 with a pickled chin but no silver sausage.
No silver? You pushing out on me here? Talk it up.
Silver ain't on my radar today.
Well, get it on your f***ing radar. I'll take a back rack, but don't up the bull foam.
Are you strung out? You girls are like Moses already. Give me extra f***ing trilby shots all over mine so these can see how a real man f***ing does it.
All right, Horsmouth, f***ing rest it. I don't need another dovetail in my trunk. You know what, f*** it. Give me a silver sausage, but no chin. And change my rack to the crack rack. You just washed my jaw.
That's talking. Let's make a night of it. Louis, get to work.
Sure thing, boss.
After this hilarious and pointless exchange, Louis, the bartender crack rack guy, goes outside to find a weird looking dog with a full dog skull and what appears to be its dog legs with what appears to be an armadillo shell for its body. Even in the background there's another dog with a jaw that seems to be split in half. It kind of looks like that same dog back when the children were entering town. Louis then says he isn't fooling anyone anymore, and a tiny part of his head comes off and goes into the sky. We now pan over to the middle of the woods where we once again see the two children and the severed head from the beginning staring at a dismembered woman. The boy then rips off the girl's head, who doesn't seem to mind, and the severed head puts himself onto the neck of the now decapitated girl and walks away. Our next scene takes place back in town at a shop called Brilg and Spowegg. Looking inside, we see it's a gun shop, and the severed head girl hybrid takes a shotgun to the counter and basically asks if it has enough power to shoot his head off. The gun clerk shows him a bigger gun, which he says would be cleaner, and so the headman, I will just call him the headman for now on, decides to buy it. The clerk says it's not enough, and the headman tells him to give him a discount. The clerk asks if he is going to commit the act this weekend, because since he only uses the gun one time, he will loan the gun to him and go to the place to retrieve the gun later, and he will just need the location on where he's going to do it. The screen then starts to get darker, and the headman tells him he might go up a hill and do it, and says the clerk should be able to hear it, which the clerk responds that he probably will. Also, I find it very curious that despite this place selling guns, as you can see in the background, this place also sells cakes. We head into the next scene depicting the clerk in bed reading, which his wife, who is beside him, is seemingly asleep. He hears a gunshot, implying the deed is done, but is surprised to hear 2 shots instead of 1, which leaves him curious. His wife tells him he was probably just testing the gun. The clerk seems unsure about it, and we then see that his wife's arm rises up and her hand disconnects, which, just like the ear and piece of the head from earlier, goes seemingly into the ceiling or the sky, despite the ceiling having no holes in it. The clerk goes to the site where he heard the gunshot, and we see the girl from the beginning with her body back on her head, and she has a hole inside of her face, showing where she got shot, followed by a pool of blood. The head seems to be sleeping on what appears to be a stone table, and an unknown red-headed man who seems to have also been shot in the head. We then see from another angle that the boy from the beginning is also shot in the head, but is still alive somehow, probably due to the helmet. The head wakes up and asks the clerk to finish the job for him, but just then a bunch of mumbling grandmothers with spider-like legs are seen gliding down from the sky. They then retrieve the head and clean up the rest of the bodies, including the gun. One of the grandmothers now approaches the clerk, who seems to be speechless upon seeing them, for good reason. He tries to talk to them, but they keep shushing him, fading the screen to black. We fade in for one last scene, and remember when I said before there was a dog that seemed to have his jaw split open earlier? Well, it returns, and it's walking around the hill where the clerk is. Just then, all the characters, both from the present and the past, join him, including a red/orange-haired man we have never seen before, and he looks an awful lot like that red-headed man who was seen shot in the hill just moments ago. We also see a doctor for some reason in the background. The dog comes up to an old-timey microphone, starts singing in of what sounds like a French or Russian accent, and we end the video off with fading out from the hill and showing the beautiful nighttime landscape. Whew. This was quite an interesting watch, and this is the kind of stuff I actually love from David. Also, regarding my 3-step system, for this one I'm going to have to ditch the first 2 steps. Why? Well, because unlike the other installments, everything seems to actually have a place here, one way or the other. We know that there are 4 different stories that are simultaneously going on. Also, by the way, the whole thing in the beginning with Billy Masters being called a bad boy, I think that's like the only thing that's not real, and mainly because it serves nothing. So anyway, the first story is the one on the severed head. The second is the man who owns the 3 skins. The third is the men without the skin. And the fourth is about a clerk. The story that actually comes first is the 3 men without skin, showing how there's a picture about them, and also the fact they're still alive without skin shows not only the fact that the weird stuff in this world is just accepted and almost never questioned, but somehow they had their skin removed while still being alive in the process. One of two things possibly happened. Either the blonde man skinned the skin off of these men, or someone else got the skin off of them and the young man bought them. It was possibly due to the three men getting punished because they seemed to fit the criteria for a mobster or gangster of some kind. So they probably did something wrong, like drinking on the job or something, and their skin was removed. The man owns the three skins and is quite possibly he was originally transgender or just a drag queen, showing that he was able to look exactly like a woman as seen from that earlier dinner party scene. It is also shown that the time between the late Renaissance and the modern late 1900s is pretty similar. Like it's apparently not as big of a gap like as the real world. And just because something interests me about David Firth's styles, he never seems to use the technology we have today as a trope. So therefore, this man is actually a woman or just pretending to be a woman to start off. We see that the man disguised as a woman is with a few different people at a dinner party, and one of the guys gets mad about something and starts chanting something. Just then, a bug with the head of the severed head from earlier comes from the sky and breaks through the roof. However, the head separates from the body and the head bites the man's forehead, getting everyone in a panic. Also, despite the woman/man, I don't know what you call it at this point, looking at the painting, it doesn't mean the whole crack segment with the three men without skin happens in the past. Well, maybe it could show that what action they did to get themselves skinned actually happened in the past, but the actual segment of the men going into the crack bar happens much later, actually, if that makes sense. So as I said a little earlier, around this time, the men have had their skins removed and the severed head is put into the middle of a field. Then, many years later, the severed head finds two children who, based on David's description of the video, the head mind controls the children into doing his bidding. He then goes home with them, and as we are walking through town, we see Louis walking the opposite direction. He is heading somewhere. The reason I say this takes place many years later is that is why the young blonde man doesn't look anything like a woman now, and will also explain why the skins almost look like snake skin instead of human. This can also be the fact that when human skin dries out, it can actually become white, showing that the skins being acquired have been hanging up for quite a long time. Also, the fact that the man's ear goes into a hole, this being Alan actually, who also appears in Sock 6. But I will get more into that when talking about Sock 6. But for now, when the ear, the headpiece, and the hand go into the air, they are all going to Alan. For right now, he seems to be either building something or recycling it. Later that night, a dog sings a song for everyone at the top of a hill, and everyone in town goes to it. So you might be asking at this point, why do I say this happens before the whole gunshot scene? Simple. Look at Louis. Earlier I mentioned that a part of his head was taken by Alan, but if that was the case, then why is his full head still intact in this scene? And before you say, oh, it's just a minor model detail David forgot about, if that was the case, then why is the blonde man still missing his ear? Plus, as I mentioned earlier, an unknown red-haired man is on the hill with everyone who looks like the third guy who was shot at the end. Since he's alive here, it brings up the point that most likely this happens first. Even the people from earlier are here, including the woman from the dinner party. But wait, I thought that was supposed to be the blonde man. Perhaps he lied about it and he's just heard it from one of them. I don't even know. Cause he probably, as I said earlier, he probably bought the skins. So that would probably make sense. So anyway, the next morning, the three skin men go to a bar or drugstore, whatever this place is supposed to be. Louis the bartender, / drug handler, helps them get what they want, but goes outside saying he can't pretend anymore. And as I said before, a part of his head is removed and most likely given to Alan. Meanwhile, in the middle of the woods, the two children and the severed head appear to have killed a woman. Why? I actually don't know, but I feel like the severed head has murderous tendencies as seen with the dinner party scene, and so he forces the children to kill this girl, but has had enough of them annoying him, so he orders the boy to remove the girl's head so he can use her body. He goes to a gun store to see what gun he can use to shoot himself, because I guess he has had enough of life at this point. He gets a shotgun loaned to him, but he apparently has an additional motive nobody knew about. The clerk is shocked to hear 2 gunshots, and when he gets there, the head is still alive, but 3 people are actually shown shot in the heads. And yes, I said 3 guys were shot despite the gun only being shot twice. Now, Could it be possible that two people were lined up and shot with one bullet? Possibly, but I don't think that's the case, because there's two things I want to address here. One being the fact that if you look at all their heads, the bullet's like not going like all the way through the head where it's like there's a hole just directly through the head. No. But then secondly, pay attention once again to the dog singing scene. We see this red-haired man who looks quite a bit like the third guy who was shot. Therefore, it is absolutely possible that there is a gap of time between the clerk hearing the two shots and walking a while to the location. What am I saying? Simple. There was a third shot that we did not hear. Why do I say this? Simply because thanks to the wide shot at the end, we see exactly how huge this place is. So it probably took a while for the clerk to walk over there. Therefore, the head kills the red-haired man that was out there first, then shoots the boy in the forehead, but thanks to his helmet, it takes him the longest to die. Lastly, a third shot possibly happens to the girl shooting herself after reattaching her head. The severed head then realizes he can't shoot himself now, and asks the clerk to do it. But before he can, some old grandmother descends from the sky to take the head. What these things are is unknown, but we actually did see a grandmother earlier on, but I didn't mention it because I didn't think it was that important until now. Back when the blonde man is smelling his skins, he looks out the window only to taunt an old woman, saying she will not have his treasure. The only thing I can deduce is she was an alien like the others, and they don't get the skins, but instead, they just kidnap the severed head since his alien-like tendencies will be useful for possible research. Or they just want to eat it, I don't know. The grandmothers then leave the clerk alone because he didn't do anything to provoke them. And that is actually the hardest one to solve, but honestly, this was one of my favorite ones. And look, I know it's going to be really convoluted. I know it's most likely probably not going to be right, but I just wanted to tell you guys about that. I thought you might find this one a bit interesting to listen to, let's say the least. And now, let's move on to my favorite one of all, Sock 6. We start with classic piano music hovering over a landscape of a deserted and static town. We zoom into a small restaurant where there are only two people inside. A gray man of what seems to be the reception's desk and a red-haired man sitting at a table. The red-haired man, who is actually confirmed to be named Nigel, asks for some service. The other man tells him that if he wants service, he needs to speak with Alan. And just like in Sox 5, Alan is represented as a hole in a wall. Also, I think this would be the best time to discuss this, but one thing not many people know is that David had a video. It's still on his channel, but only through membership, even though others have uploaded it for free. He had a video called Alan. Alan also kind of looks like this gray man at the desk, but what Alan did was he was a superhero who flew in a UFO, and his power was that he could see the locations where someone would die. The only problem though was he would find out about it only 10 seconds before their death. Also, not helping him is the fact that he is very slow. So, is this hole in the wall the same Alan? It's pretty coincidental that two characters in David's world are both named Alan. And also, most of David's characters don't even have names. So yeah, I think it's clear they're the same. So, how did Alan get to a whole new plane of existence? I personally believe he was murdered, and thanks to his power, but not thanks to his mobility, he was killed. And due to having this time-like power, he was able to manifest anywhere he wants, and can take anything he wants as shown in Sock 5. Back to Sock 6, Nigel gets up and starts to ask Alan for some service, but the other man tells him not to stare directly into Alan. Seemingly not taking this advice, he asks Alan for a meal, which angers the man at the desk, telling him, "No requests, you get what you are given." Listening to Nigel, Alan uses some tentacles to bring out a lower half of a mouth to give to Nigel. Nigel takes it, and the mouth doesn't speak but only does some weird murmuring noise. Nigel then decides to try to kiss the mouth until a woman manifests into the chair beside him. She is also the only character in this video with subtitles, but she says she would choose somewhere else to sit, but this is the only one nobody died in already, and that she counts the people who come in here and die. She says to Nigel that she is counting him right now, to which Nigel replies, "How many of me in total?" She tells him that he will just be one. always just one. Then she simply just dies. The man at the desk says to Nigel that she isn't dead, and she scams people by making them think she's died for some reason. Alan tells them to leave her with him and uses his tentacles to drag her into his hole, but has two other guys looking very similar to the man at the desk floating out. And they are also wearing pants. As soon as they come alive, they both repeatedly request that Nigel goes with them to the car. Nigel's understandably confused, but follows them, and apparently there's a car that they actually want him to get inside of that is outside the restaurant. We cut to inside the car where we see a buff-looking gray man and a cow of all things besides Nigel in the back seat. And we also see the two guys from earlier before they were asking Nigel to get into the car calmly, and now they are crying that he will not cooperate with them to get into the car. Nigel tries telling them that he is in fact in the car. A moment later, one of the men get angry and says if he doesn't cooperate, he will rip his spleen out. Nigel convinces them that he is in the car, and Nigel pulls out the mouth, and the cow beside him grabs it from him and asks if this is theirs now. Nigel eventually answers that since they took it, it's theirs. The cow then begins making out with it and is then disgusted by it. She tells Nigel to tell his mom her items are crap. The cow is now mad at Nigel, and we see the road is getting more and more foggy, and we end up at a place where a lot of gray guys are on fire. The two gray men from the car get out and start to melt due to being caught on fire. The other guy in the back seat of the car appears to be gone, but probably submitted to the fire, as well as Nigel and the cow go to look at this burning site. The cow tells Nigel he shouldn't be looking at stuff like that, and we notice that the cow has a name tag which says Craig. Nigel reasonably says that is a very strange name for a cow, and Craig tells him her mother was Jewish and didn't name her properly. Nigel then flirts with Craig and asks the mouth for permission, and after the mouth does that weird sound, they start making out. The next scene is Nigel driving Craig somewhere, and as shown in Nigel's point of view, Alan has somehow made his way to the side of Craig's face, which makes Nigel look away from her. This makes Craig think she is hideous, and Nigel reassures her. Nigel puts his hand into Alan, which seems to cause the side pockets of the car to fill up with meat. Craig starts eating some of it, and Nigel says it might be beef, to which Craig apparently does not care. Nigel does the same thing and eats some meat, where Craig tells him it might be human, which prompts Nigel to stop the car and puke outside. We cut to black and come back to see Nigel on the ground with 5 small rocks and 1 pointy rock that is not with the other small rocks. Craig comes over, and Nigel, now laughing at something, tells her to choose one. Craig is hesitant, but Nigel informs her that he wants her to guess to see if she got it right. He shows her the 5 small rocks, being 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. Craig notices 4 missing from the list and says she chooses 4. Nigel is shocked by this result and tells her the pointy one in the distance is 4. She says she knows, and that's the one that she chooses. It's also to be noted that Craig's voice has actually changed a little bit. It now sounds more hungover and jolly. Maybe it's hinting at something.
I said, is this mine?
And that's the one I choose.
Nigel accepts and taps the pointy rock, splitting it in coincidentally 6 different ways with a white substance coming out of it, and we hear a cow yell. We now see a close-up of Nigel bursting out laughing, and we then see a wider shot showing that Craig has somehow died. It's also worth noting that the pointy rock is back in its original state, where it's not split into 6 different pieces. Alan is then seen to be in the back of Craig's head, and Nigel pulls out the mouth once more. Nigel then starts making out with the mouth, and it seems that the mouth isn't having fun with Nigel. Sometime later, 2 cops come by and for some reason say to him, "Evening Stockton." I originally thought this was referring to the city in California, but thanks to the commenter Avnub66 on the Sock 6 video, if you look in the timestamps, apparently this was a callback to a very old, 17-year-old to be exact, video David made called Fat Pie 2 Dane vs. Pound Man, where a bouncer says the same line in the same voice.
Evening, Stockton.
Evening, Stockton.
The cops tell Nigel to open the boot of the car, which we find a pool of blood with Craig's decaying corpse in it. We then see Nigel get arrested and he is transported to a prison. The cops lead him to a room with a toilet and a sign saying entry with permit only. It's also to be noted that this is one of the last times we see Alan's hole, which in this scene is in the ceiling. Out from the hole comes a surveillance camera with an organic-looking human eye. Nigel shows the camera his permit and the camera goes away, and then Nigel approaches the toilet. Instead of using it though, he instead curls up behind it. Moments later, a woman comes into the same room and Nigel shows her his permit. Ironically, for some reason she doesn't show her permit, but I guess she's just welcome to it. The woman sits on the toilet, and we see that now Nigel has a piece of cardboard paper and a pen, and asks the woman if she's making a 1 or a 2 today. It's also worth mentioning here that if you look at Nigel's paper, the questions written on it are complete gibberish. I will spare you the details of all Nigel asks, but basically he began asking her about her bowel movements and suddenly escalates it by asking her if she ever thinks of suicide, which she says she has thought about it but doesn't consider it an option. Nigel then starts asking her questions relating to sex in some forms or another until he says that the questions are all complete. He asks if she would like her mother to be present for the results, to which she requests her older sister, who was like a mother to her. We now see the final time that Alan's hole appears when right beside the woman we see the hole on a wall and it appears to open like a window, and on the other side is the same woman from the beginning who faked having a heart attack in the restaurant. She appears to be on fire, showing that this is most likely the place from before where the gray men were being lit on fire. The woman with the subtitle says to the woman on the toilet, "Stop it, Jeremy," to which the woman on the toilet tells her that her name is Carol and confirms that the woman on fire is named Sue. Sue says to Carol that she's only Jeremy when she feels like it and she never took time to look for others in her pursuits. Carol tells Sue that all that matters is she is Carol today. Nigel interrupts to read the results, and Sue says she doesn't care about the results but wishes Carol would leave Jeremy behind, but Carol tells her it isn't that quite simple. Nigel goes ahead and says the results, which were 100% negative, even though we don't even know what the test was. But Nigel says everything seems normal and it should be good news, limiting the scope as to what the test was. We then zoom out from the restroom and are now shown some visuals of a road with water surrounding it as credits roll. That right there is the end of Sock 6. Okay, let's get to the point of the story. First things first, let's figure out Nigel's story in all this. Nigel seems to be the only normal one here up until the third act, also showing how twisted he becomes, and also when he was testing Carol at the end for something, I feel like it would make sense if he were a psychiatrist or doctor of some kind. Normally, if a psychiatrist encounters a lot of loopy patients, the psychiatrist is shown as the only normal one that has a grip on reality. However, this is David Firth we're talking about. Perhaps it's the opposite. Everyone is purposely not in order when putting their events together, as shown in all of David's stuff. So when Nigel tries to see the world in its present moment, it views him as the crazy one. We notice based on his test with Carol that he is most likely acting as a physical therapist, or maybe he actually is one, that's most likely. He has a lady with most likely DID, multiple personality disorder, showing why today she is Carol and other days she is Jeremy. Also, if you're wondering, Sue probably knows Nigel because when having lunch at a restaurant, she made a scene by pretending to have a heart attack, so now it's shown she's Carol/Jeremy's sister, and there's nothing else to that. This happens pretty early in the timeline, but things take a turn for the worse once a woman is introduced into his life. Nigel does not appear to be that good of a person as you get to know him, and I honestly believe that the mouth represents the physical beauty of a woman Nigel has affection for. Keep in mind, only physical. That is why is nothing but a mouth that speaks gibberish is according to Nigel's perspective. I can deduce that he doesn't care what this woman wants or needs, which is why we never hear this thing say actual words. He later meets a patient that probably identifies as bi or transgender named Craig. Despite being a male name, it has a female voice, keeping the gender or sexuality a mystery. Basically, Craig finding the mouth and telling Nigel his items are utter crap is just saying that Craig found out about the girl and now there's a bit of a woman situation. Because at this time, Nigel is starting to get a relationship with Craig, if that makes sense. The gray men dying in the fire, I believe, is somewhat fake actually. but think of it as an analogy that despite Nigel screwing things up with Craig, he must burn some bridges with his love relationships. However, instead of dumping one of the girls to soothe this whole thing over, instead he has how do I say this? A two-sided relationship involving himself and two women, let's say that. Or, well, actually, it's probably also the other way around, depending on what gender you view Craig as. Later on, Nigel gets Craig hungover, judging by the drowsy type of voice Craig switches to, and Nigel sets up a game for Craig. There are 6 items, but Nigel only counts 5, leaving out the number 4, which Craig chooses due to curiosity. And listen to the sound the rock makes when Nigel chooses 4. It sounds almost like a gunshot, and what do you know, a revolver has 6 bullets, it has a full chamber of just 6, and if he made a twisted drunk version of Russian roulette, this very well could have killed Craig. Nigel may be a bit drunk himself due to his laughing and drowsy nature directly after. And if you are wondering, the reason white liquid comes out of the rock is just due to David telling us that they had a fun time before this happens, if you know what I mean. David is known for being pretty edgy, as you can tell from almost all of his stuff. And the reason the rock is back in its original form after Craig dies is showing that Nigel did his best to hide all the evidence, including the bullets. Now, he can be with the original girl, despite him treating her like utter crap. She doesn't seem to like Nigel, since it seems she is disgusted by him at this point. 2 cops then come by after hearing a disturbance nearby and ask him to open the trunk where he hid Craig's body. Also, the cops here and the ones at the beginning both seem to tell him to get into the car. The only difference though is how they are viewed. All cops appear solemn and serious on the outside, but on the inside, in this case metaphorically and literally, they are smaller and a little bit more giddy. Early on, the cops were crying that Nigel wouldn't get in the car, and most likely Nigel went mad and tried to run and fight them, but the cops thankfully apprehended him. He is now in prison for the rest of his days, reliving all the past incidents that led up here, but gets more chaotic and makes way less sense. That brings us to our final mystery and point, which is, what is Alan? I believe he is Nigel's guidance in this case, and this is the same Alan from David's short film Alan, and also the same guy from SOC 5. All that Alan does is induce chaos and makes things happen to make way less sense. Alan is just there to spiral chaos and make the story less understandable to Nigel. And in SOC 5, he just made everything weirder just so we would pay more attention to the story David was trying to tell. And that, my friends, is not only my interpretation of SOC 6, but sadly, we have come to a close. I would also like to say, if you want to see another analysis on SOC 6, there was another YouTuber back then, I think this is when SOC 6 came out, their name was The Red Herring, and they actually made a little bit of analysis on SOC 6 that I honestly found really enjoyable. It was some good evidence. So if you want to see more stuff on solving David Firth stuff, they made a video, and also I have some stuff, like I've made a lot, like I think I made 3 at this point, Salad Fingers mysteries on the channel. So I might include them in the cards above, and I might make a David Firth playlist to make this easier. So anyway, I am Complex to Live. I hope you learned a little bit of something today, and I hope to see you guys on the other side. Bye bye.